Kaushik, can I just ask you for a little bit more clarity on the nominal numbers and the role that the deflators have played in keeping real GDP at 4.5%? These deflators link up to the WPI, so it's not surprising that they are lower this quarter?
Yeah, so, they give a disproportionate weight to WPI, and therefore, compared to the CPI, whatever the average was for July, September, the deflator would be lower if the WPI is, very low. So this is a problem, and I don't know how, this needs to be taken care of, because if RBI is targeting inflation, CPI should have a higher weight in the GDP deflator, but we've been following this model for a long time. So anyway, we have nominal GDP growth at 6%, and I'm not saying nominal GDP will stabilize at 6%. It should go up close to 8.5–9% this year. But whenever nominal GDP growth is lower than your nominal interest rate, say 10-year bond is at 6.5, you'll have debt GDP kind of increasing. So that's a source of concern, and we have done this study where we've seen that India's debt sustainability hinges mostly on having a good quality and high growth. And nominal GDP growth typically in India has been much higher than the nominal interest rate, or real growth has been higher than the real interest rate. So if that metric doesn't work out, then you'll have debt GDP kind of first flattening out and then starting to rise, which is the case in many advanced countries. So in India's case, we don't see that scenario. We see nominal GDP growth slowly increasing to close to 8.5–9%. But remember that the government has taken close to 11.5–12% growth for its fiscal calculations. So from that standpoint, if you assume a 9% growth, there would be some shortfall in the fiscal, even if all the numbers are kept constant.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Rahul, also, this level of nominal GDP growth, 8% last quarter, 6.1% now, explains why there's all this gloom and doom in the industry as well, right, among corporates, because at the end of the day, that is what matters to them most.
Yeah, so absolutely. I think the top line revenue growth has been quite weak, and if we look at the sources of where this top line revenue growth is coming from, it's largely centered in areas like agriculture. We have seen a bit of a pickup in places in certain services, and certain sectors like financial sector is reporting growth close to around 6%, but we know that this particular sector is going through some stress as well, and so some of the numbers don't really make a lot of sense, but at the same time, I would say at the aggregate level, when you have nominal GDP growth at around 6%, it is going to create a lot of pain, and this actually gels up well with the data that RBI had put out earlier about flow of funds themselves being negative year on year, negative from a year-to-date perspective, and probably kind of reflects the kind of pain that's kind of come through from a working capital perspective, and also hopefully going forward in the next 6 months, we are going to see these conditions normalize, and that in itself should help nominal GDP growth improve at the margin.
Slightly peripheral issue, Siddhartha, if I can just round up this conversation and then come to some of the other components. There's been this sort of underlying buzz that's been picking up as to whether we picked an inflation target which was too low, and whether India needs higher inflation. I know that's not directly relevant to this conversation, but I'm drawing a link between the low nominal GDP and the fact that we've been in a period where real growth has been low, inflation has been low. So in some ways, you haven't really seen any benefit from what was supposed to be a positive, low inflation.
I think low inflation in the Indian context is clearly positive. And remember, if you go back to the previous last time when we had hit this kind of a growth rate, way back in 2013, at that point of time, the CPI numbers used to be in close to double digits, if not in double digits. Compared to that, given that we are at a low inflation zone at this moment, it gives a lot of comfort to policymakers, no doubt about that. Having said that, given that India's long-term CPI average is slightly higher than what we are seeing now, so if India's long-term CPI average had been close to 7% and the current number is more in the 3% handle, in 2021, when we come closer to review the inflation targeting mandate once again, I'm pretty sure this particular discussion will come up, make some bit of a comeback, whether we can think of, maybe not we will think of a 7%, but possibly a slightly more slightly more relaxed band or slightly more different number to target, that possibility cannot really be ruled out a couple of years down.